Everyone wants to get to the high places, but if you want to go high, you first have to go deep. Hey, what's up? Back on. Here we go. Why are you laughing? You're laughing at me.
Oh, what a good intro.
Because I'm happy.
Yeah.
The joy of the Lord is my strength. We're going to be talking a little bit about today. You want to talk about teams.
I do.
Leadership.
Okay, perfect.
You told me leadership. I just think teams when you say leadership. What specifically?
I was just bringing up, it's interesting that a lot of churches, I believe, and a lot of businesses, not super great.
You always go to the churches first, don't you?
I do, because that was where
Jake,
I came
people
from.
think I like talking about church. It's really Jake.
It's really
likes
me.
talking about church.
100%.
All the questions. You mean a lot of businesses are not great at what particularly? Leadership?
Yeah, stewardship, giving ways for people to grow up and actually have ways to ascend or... Okay, so for example, one of the things that I struggle with for so long is like, how do you learn? How do you get better? In business, you can just train people and teach them to get better.
Oh, it's so easy.
Yeah, it's very like, you're like, here's the thing, here's the person, they'll show you how to do this. In church, it's like, no, I just came here for, sometimes it's I just came here for me, or I don't got time, I'm too busy, or I'm only going to play and I'm not going to spend time with anybody else. It's like not as much of a team effort, and then we wonder why people just feel kind of spread out.
I had a client message me yesterday, and they said, do you ever just want to fire like your entire team and start over? We call this like, there are a couple of different dreams that entrepreneurs have that they don't want to tell people are dreams. Like they're like fantasies. So like the quitting fantasy is one of them, where like when an entrepreneur is feeling really, really stressed, they just dream about quitting. Because when you're in the middle of it, man, it's like, dude, working at Starbucks just sounds amazing because I don't have to do anything. I just show up. So that's the quitting fantasy. The team fantasy is when you think that all your problems are because of your team, and you're like, well, if I could just fire everyone and start over, maybe that would fix my problems. And people feel that a lot. So I told this client, I said, when we were in the thick of scale, like the first time, like 2018, 2019, I was like, yeah, every other day. I was like, can we just get rid of everyone? Because they're expensive, we have to pay them for things, or else you get in trouble. And then they don't do their job. So we're paying them to not do their jobs. This was like me learning leadership corporately. And we could talk about that. We could talk about leadership and how to train people. But the thing is, you don't train people as a project. You really have to get into like training people as a lifestyle, because people don't remember things. We were on an executive meeting yesterday, and one of the operations people, and she's like sharp, dude. She's like a Swiss Army knife, Lauren. She can do anything.
Yep.
And we're putting in new bonuses for our sales teams. It's one of the things I'm like, so I just wrapped up this sales book. I almost died to write it. I rewrote it 4 times. It's like the last 10 years of sales training that you've talked about. You came from this. 50,000 people were trained on this. And I tell our salespeople, like, we'll pretty much only change the comp to make you more money, because I've gone through the battles of like trying to lower sales comp, and then it just never works.
So you killed everything.
It destroys everyone.
Yeah.
So we're adding new bonuses for the sales team, and Lauren is like, let's make sure that we explain it to them so they understand. I was like, yeah, that ain't gonna work. They're not gonna understand it on the first or second or third. They're gonna understand it like the 9th or 10th time. People tend to remember things as soon as you are exhausted from telling them. And my dad used to teach me this, because I don't know if we've gone into like my dad. We're gonna have him on the show at some point. My dad was a VP of sales at Allstate. He managed like 5,500 salespeople in the U.S. And so, my dad, he just wrote that book, which is an amazing book. It's called The Legacy Navigator. And it's about how do you like raise healthy kids and take care of your family while you're advancing your career. And he used to tell me, he'd be like, son, I'm like, I just want to go to Sonic or something. I'm not ready for a lesson. He'd be like, son, by the time you're tired of saying it, people will have heard it for the first time. I'm like, yo, I don't care. I want some tater tots from Sonic. Why are you giving me a lesson right now?
Yeah.
But this is my dad growing up. Like, he was in leadership and he taught me. He would drag me to these John Maxwell conferences as like a 12-year-old, 13-year-old. He'd pull me out of school. My teachers, in hindsight, had learned that they were very frustrated with this because he would pull me out of school on like a random Wednesday and he would make me go to these simulcasts. You know what a simulcast is?
Is that somewhere you go somewhere and you watch a screen?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, like you're in a church with a bunch of business leaders watching John or Patrick Lencioni or someone on a screen from Atlanta. They're in a big arena.
Yeah,
and
I
they're
did that.
simulcasting out to all of these. And as a kid, I was just like, these are meaningless. This is the worst thing that I could possibly be doing. And so my dad would barter. He would like get me Chick-fil-A on the way, and he would be like, I'll get you food and you can have something to like draw pictures and stuff and take notes. And I'm taking notes of random stuff. I'm not even paying attention. But when I got into like corporate and my career kicked off, it was phenomenal how many things that I'd actually learned from these simulcasts that I didn't realize I had learned. And so I kind of got a little bit of a leg up. I think I was a little bit lucky. Because I'm 35. I'm the youngest of, when I go hang out with business owners, I'm usually like the kid. Like people I was talking with Garrett White a couple of weeks ago, and he's like 50, and Dan is in his mid 40s. So I've always been the guy that's like too young to be in the room. But then I've hired more people than all these guys have, like 700 people. And so it's funny because they'll be like, how'd you do that? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I've never formally broken it down before.
Right.
But a lot of it came from my dad teaching me when I was a kid, 12 years old. I remember listening to Andy Andrews. Do you know him? Andy Andrews is an author, and he lives down in the Gulf. And I remember this like I was 13 or 14, and he was telling a story about the butterfly effect. How the butterfly effect is essentially the ripple effect of leadership. When you make an important decision, it affects the people that are around you, your immediate sphere. But then those people go out, and because of your decision, they affect other people in their immediate sphere. And then those people, because of that decision, go out and affect other people. And so one leader, Winston Churchill changed the course of the entire world. But Winston Churchill would not have been able to do what he was able to do if Abraham Lincoln wasn't able to keep the U.S. together. And then Abraham Lincoln wouldn't have been able to do what he was, and you just track it back through history.
Yep.
And there are these like bright spots in history and dark spots in history. When you look at like Adolf, people want to crucify me for this, but you look at the leadership caliber of someone like an Adolf, and what you have is a very skilled orator, a very skilled leader, doing all of the wrong things for the wrong reasons. So you have to be careful. I think I've had to learn to be careful when I'm teaching leadership. I want to make sure that the people that I'm teaching are going to make the world better, not worse. And I think that's why we haven't fully broken it down before. That's like has nothing to do with anything, but that's the background. So you can tell, if you're watching this, just for the record, we should just put this out there.
Yeah.
I literally submitted the manuscript today. So mentally, I'm like, dude, if you wanted to start talking about birds, I would just start talking about birds.
Perfect. Yeah.
I was like, I have no agenda for today. I will get myself so confused if you just point me in a direction and don't intervene. What are we talking about again?
I would love to. Can I just ask questions that I have?
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be awesome.
As a man, how do you start when? Okay, let's just go back from the beginning and work our way till now. Going from church, and you were used to being, because that was one of your main. That was leadership that you actually wanted to be under for a long time, right? That was the first time. Okay.
Yeah.
What were the parts of leadership that you were like, okay, I want to hold on to these things. These things are good. These things I think we could twist. One thing I would love to even get your thoughts on while you're answering that is that there's a lot of people that would say, like, within the church world, there feels like there's a little bit of emotional manipulation. You've talked about it as like it's basically just free labor. What do you feel like? I was like, I kid you not. When you said that, I was like, man, I've never thought of it that way before. It basically is like
Yeah.
you've got camera, you got production team, you've got a sound guy, you've got instruments, you've got all this stuff. What do you think? Like, what did you pull on a positive note from leadership in the church worlds? What have you taken with you, and what have you left behind?
Patrick Lencioni has a cool book on this where he talks about the different personalities of leaders and how it's like a personality test for leadership. But one of the main traits, I think there are 8 of them. I don't have the book in front of me, but one of them is like you can be a galvanizer leader. Do you know what the word galvanizing means?
It's like I'm feeling I'm going to butcher it, so I'm not going to say it. I don't know.
Let me give you the textbook definition. To excite someone into taking action. So one of them is galvanizing a team. Means Dwight Eisenhower, who was the U.S. president, he was the commanding general over the Allied forces. He said, leadership is getting someone to do something you need them to do because they want to do it, which is a great definition of leadership. But that does sound like manipulation if you don't understand the nuances of it.
Right.
In fact, the opener of the sales book is like, a lot of people think that sales is manipulation, which, okay, let's say that it is. You have to look at your life. If you are hardcore against manipulation, no matter what, black, white, you need to stop working out because you're manipulating your body to get stronger.
Right.
You need to stop eating good food because you're manipulating your life to live longer. You need to stop reading because you're manipulating your brain to get smarter. So it's not really manipulation that we have to focus on. It's really the motive behind it. Everything from an influence standpoint is technically it is changing somebody's behavior to match what it needs to be. And when I was coming up in the church world, my first boss, if you will, who's my pastor in Memphis, his name is John, Pastor John, and phenomenal communicator, loves people. He's just a great person, When you got into his staff and the people around him, I think that there were issues, and he would admit that. But
Sure.
One of his most amazing talents was like he could get you excited about anything, like anything. He could show up and people would be excited to just like clean the asphalt in front of the church. Galvanizer, like you can get people so excited to do something. And that was something that I noticed and I started studying because if we're honest, there are things in life that we have to do, but we don't want to do it. I tell people there are two types of enthusiasm. You've maybe heard this talk before. The first type of enthusiasm is you're excited because of something that you've been looking forward to. You get to do it. That's easy. You can get a team to do something that's fun pretty easily. That's not skill. That doesn't require skill. That's just human nature. The second type of enthusiasm is for the thing that you must do because of what you get on the other side of it. And this is most of life's most important work. You're not necessarily going to feel like naturally motivated to do it. Like this book, for instance. Bro, for 4 weeks, the last thing I've wanted to do is like work on this stupid book. The last thing I wanted to do. Because I'd already written it 4 times. But I'm enthusiastic about the work because of what comes on the other side of that. Leadership, the great leaders are people who can get people in mass to be excited to do something that's not inherently fun, but because of what they get on the other side of that. And John was a master at that. Most pastors are actually quite good at that. When you get into like organizational leadership with teams, one of the things I've developed a talent at is putting groups of people together that can operate in sync. So like you have a business, you have a marketing team, a sales team, a finance team, an operations team, a new product team, whatever. When you can get all of these teams to enthusiastically work towards something at the same time, you have magic. Because then you can create movements out of that. What's hard is when you have one team that is not excited about what they're doing and they just drag the other teams down with them. And so the pace of an organization slows down, innovation slows down. There was another pastor whose name was should I use his real name or not? We'll just call him Stan.
Okay.
We'll call him Stan because I don't know anybody named Stan. Do you?
No.
Okay, good. We'll go with Stan. He was equally as good at galvanizing people, but he was deeply insecure. And he was manipulative in his motive. So he just got people to do things, but eventually you saw him in this church, like people lost trust with him. People didn't trust him because he would say one thing over here to galvanize a group of people. He would say something totally different over here, and there was no alignment between how he was treating people. And so it's almost like his stance would change on different things based on whatever he was trying to get done in the moment. And I think that is what we have to be careful with, because the better you are at communication, the better you are at speaking and influencing other people, you have to be real careful that you are not just using that gift to get other people to do something for you. And so a healthy leader with good communication styles and good influence, they're always going to be influencing other people in a way that is good for the people, not just good for them. Does that make sense?
It does. It seems like what you're pointing back to is a good leader is often able to become better by self-awareness. How do you develop that?
Well, it's not just self-awareness. A good leader is usually sacrificially influential. So Jesus was the greatest leader of all time. He was basically like, "Yo, you want to be a good leader? Be a good servant." Like, what?
Yeah.
No, that's not why I'm in leadership. I don't belong to the Sanhedrin to serve. I'm in the Sanhedrin so people can serve me. Jesus is like, no, you got it all backwards. Your motives are all backwards. Your motives are for you, not for them. And therefore, you're disqualified for leadership. That's why they killed him, because he showed up completely opposite. But the reason he was such a good leader is because everything he had people do was ultimately for the benefit of them. Jesus didn't need them to be like, validating Jesus's authority. He wasn't trying to stack up credit for himself. So it's less about self-awareness. It's more about the motive of a person at the top. So like, let's take someone, for instance. Let's take Dean, who is a partner in on our sales team. We've had some really intense conversations because that's part of leadership too.
Who is Dean?
Dean runs sales for like 12 companies. And the greatest gift I can give to a high-performing player is higher standards, because they got everything else. They have the ability to go make money on their own. They have the ability to get a job where they want to get a job. But what they sometimes don't have the ability to do is to see their own potential. You know what I mean? It's like you take Dean. He's on his way to Chicago right now for a bodybuilding competition. Great wife. Just had his first son 9 months ago. His life is moving up in the right direction. He's great at sales. He's great with people. He's great with influence. He understands how business works. My gift to him is not just taking him and turning him away from being a wreck into like having his life together. That's not my gift. My gift to him is saying, look, however good you think your life is right now, it can actually be here. It's higher standards. And when you're a high performer, you recognize that. People tell us this all the time. I'm at your company because I want to learn how to be a better version of myself. No one else can teach me that. There's only a few people that, if you're truly in the top 10%, there's only a few people that you feel like can actually get that extra 10% juice. And so leadership's not just about making people feel good. It's about making people be good. And that requires sometimes accountability, intense conversations where you're raising the bar. As a leader, we're always bar lifters. We're never lowering the bar to meet someone where they're at. We're always showing them how much more they have in their potential.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. Can we go a little bit personal for a second?
Totally, bro.
I want to share something with you.
Let's bleed.
I'll bleed first then. When let's go back to before I got hired as sales mentor.
Okay.
I had come from church a lot. I had my own business. I was a filmmaker, photographer, doing my own thing. I really struggled with a lot of church leadership for a lot of my time in church. I felt like there was a lot of partiality. I felt like I dealt with a lot of things I just didn't like about
When you
church.
say partiality, you mean like favorites?
Yes.
Okay.
Very much favorites, unequal standards across the board. They were pretty obvious. And before I started working with you, there was a youth pastor of mine. His name was Andrew. And I remember meeting him, and we sat down for coffee, and he just barely knew me, but he knew my heart. And he was like, hey, I want you to take over this thing. Knew him for like 5 days. And he was like, he could just figure out real quick that I wasn't playing around. And over the next year, we would grab coffee every week. And maybe he really took the time to disciple me and teach me a lot of things. And I was like, oh, this is good leadership. And I remember when I came across your ad, I was like, this is a leader that I could learn from a lot. But when I came to you, there was a big disconnect. You were like, dude, this guy doesn't get it. I was looking at you like, I don't know what, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I think that back when I first went through Sales Mentor, I used to think of you like an idol. I literally thought to myself, I thought maybe I could be the luckiest person in the world if one day Taylor has VIP tickets and I can pay $2,000 to do a VIP ticket and have a photo with him. I think I told my parents that. I was like, Taylor Welch is the coolest person ever. Like I was like, I'll never meet Taylor Welch. And so when I was on the call with you, I was willing to do whatever it took. But there was just a massive disconnect between me and you. And I want to know, what did you see? How, like, we had a very unlikely relationship. Like, you very much did not want to hire me. And the reason I bring this up is I think there's a lot of business owners out there that probably have good potential. They don't know how to look at potential correctly. Obviously, you didn't look at potential very well because you didn't want to hire me and someone else had to hire me and we had to figure this out later. But there's people that there's potential in front of them. They don't know how to look at it.
Yeah.
And that's what actually allowed me to grow is I didn't have good leadership for a long time.
Yeah.
And when I did have it, I was thriving.
I mean, I remember that conversation.
Yeah.
You showed up on a Zoom call
I have the recording.
and you were in like a dark dungeon.
I turned my bedroom into a studio and put foam all over the wall because I was a musician and trying to make videos.
And I was just like, musicians are the worst in the world to hire because they don't sleep, they don't show up on time. But I was a musician, so I was like, I'm not going to hire you because you're a musician who works at a church and you don't. I remember thinking like, this person's going to be hard to train, which proved to be true. You have to admit that.
I did 100%. I watched it back. It was ridiculous.
But first, the interesting thing, never meet your idols. I mean, that's like number one.
Yeah,
like,
clearly horrible idea.
When you have like when someone is on such a high pedestal, and back then, like, dude, I was a different person back then too.
Sure.
Like,
yeah.
I didn't care. I was very much like. Now you see, like, when I'm at events and stuff, like, even we were talking about Tampa.
Yeah.
We went to Tampa and it's spoken at events, and I want to stay around. I want to be around people because I want to connect people with the real me. Like, I don't want them to just see a video like this and think that I'm not a real person. So I stick around and I'm engaging, and I like that now where I get to meet people who have seen my content. But back then I wasn't. I was running 4 companies, a couple hundred staff. We were scaling. I was like, I don't have time.
Yeah.
I don't have time to build a brand. I don't have time to stick around after an event. So I would literally go speak and I would leave. That was that season for me. And with you, I remember thinking like, this is a kid. I think you were like, what, 19?
Yeah.
19. I was like, bro, you're going to take me forever to train. So pass. Hard pass. And I remember you were kind of like fought for it, and I was like, all right, cool, see ya. And I just think I left the meeting.
You were 10 minutes late. The interview was 3 minutes long, and you said you would circle back, which led to a text from the interviewer.
Yeah.
Never had another call.
I have made a very good living from betting on people. So it's not that I don't know how to recognize potential, but I think at the time my grid was set up differently than it is now.
Yeah.
What was the question though?
The question was, how did you recognize the potential? Like, let's talk about that first meeting. I came in basically kind of hired behind your back. You weren't very happy about the decision. I didn't care. I don't hold any of this against you, by the way, at all. It's just funny.
I wasn't unhappy about the decision. I didn't care. I was like, I'm not going to put my name on it.
Okay, got it. Cool. So I get to Nashville 4 days later in a motel. I show up to the office nervous. I had already closed my first sale the first day I worked there. And I remember I was just scared out of my mind. I was like, I'm 7 years younger than the youngest person here. I'm definitely gonna get fired. I'm a closer on a new sales team. The whole previous team just got fired the week before. I walk into the office and I want you to be brutally honest. Like I want you to be very honest about what you saw in me. I think a lot of people would relate to this. When I walked in, I thought I was pretty good. I had come from, I was becoming a bigger fish in a smaller pond back home. And so I think I had this mentality of like, oh, I am probably pretty good. Maybe I am. I don't know. Like my standard was very different than your standard. And there was a massive mismatch there. And you sensed something into the room. And I want you to just be brutally honest about what you felt, saw, and then what did you realize that you had to fix about that?
I just sense a lot of ego,
Why?
but I think that ego was more insecurity.
Yeah,
With you.
for sure.
Why? Okay, so you can tell a lot about a person, especially when you start studying, like when you study communication as in depth as I have.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell by how quickly someone answers a question, how confident they are.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that brand. This is all like a decision tree, you know. So the way that I read people is like I'm sort of reading a matrix. Like it's a decision tree. So let's say I ask a question in a meeting, it takes you too long to answer.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we have a confidence issue. People would naturally assume that confidence is tied to them being not confident in themselves, but there's a branch there.
Mm-hmm.
That's not always true.
Right.
Confidence branches out into two layers. This person could either not be confident on the answer, so they just haven't had time to put it together, which typically happens if you have like high detail oriented personalities, because they don't want to give an answer unless they know that the answer is correct.
Right.
And I root this out like fast, because there's nothing wrong with having a high detail personality, but if you're a perfectionist, you're going to fail.
Mm-hmm.
So with you had some delays in how you would respond. You would even have delays in like, you can tell when somebody is like non-verbally communicating. It's like in post editing, like let's point that section back to you because you're doing a lot of this. You're non-verbally communicating with me.
Right.
There was none of that. So the way that you were communicating in that meeting was like this.
Yeah.
I was like, this dude has like issues, or there's something mentally wrong with him.
Yeah.
And then your delay with questions, some of them were unnecessary. And so you can either have a confidence issue in your question, which means you have a high detail personality, you don't want to give the wrong answer, which is fear, or you're just not confident in general in yourself. But then the things that you would say didn't align with the state that you were in.
Can you explain that?
Yep. So I don't remember the exact thing because I don't have the recording, but you kind of gave this vibe from your words. Have you ever had someone talk to you and their words don't match how they're saying it? Mm-hmm. It's like, how are you? Dude, I'm better than I've ever been before in my entire life. Like, cool. There's a massive mismatch there.
Right.
Something's not right.
Yeah.
What you want a match between what someone is saying and then how they're saying it. It's like the energy and the words need to match. So you were like very, very slow, like maybe some not good confidence. But then your words were like, I'm going to crush every target that you ever give to me. And I've never failed at anything before. And you didn't say those exact words, but like the things you were saying were like not matching. Mm-hmm. And I just clocked it as ego. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that was correct. That was pretty accurate. But the ego was coming from insecurity. You just like, you got hired, the founder didn't want to hire you. You got to prove yourself quickly. Mm-hmm. You know, very much that situation going on. I think I kept you after on that meeting.
You kept me for like 30 minutes and the whole team like looked at me.
What happened?
You basically were drilling me on that I had a lot of ego, and I was like, really? Like I was like, really? Like I was surprised, and I wanted to hear more, and you were almost surprised that I wanted to hear more, and I wasn't going to fight you. And you were like, why aren't you asking questions? Where are your questions? And it was kind of like, I remember it feeling more like an interrogation, and then I was so amped up. I was like, this is great, because I've never had this leadership before. It was difficult. I will say that it was very, very difficult for that intensity of leadership. At that, I just never experienced it. But I was like, this is where I want to be.
Yeah. We don't do that as much anymore. Like Those sales meetings were wild.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't hopped on a sales meeting recently. There's an element of that because what I want to get in a conversation is I want to get to the real person.
Right.
I never want to be like trapped in some facade of a human.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want the real version of the person. And it's really hard to hide what's really there in high stakes, high stress environments.
Mm.
And so sometimes, especially in those days, we would manufacture a little bit of a higher stress kind of environment,
Yeah.
especially for new people. The vets, Josh Johnson and Cole and Peyton, they were just like, oh, it's another day.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's getting publicly assassinated.
Yeah.
So let's just watch and take notes and enjoy it. But for the new guys and the new girls, it was quite scary.
Yeah.
But when it's scary, you get the real thing. What's actually there? You can't put yourself together in time. And this, by the way, is only for sales.
Right.
We do not have anything like this with operations
Yeah.
or marketing because those departments have to run different. So it's specific to sales. And I don't remember exactly what happened after that, but I do remember being confused that you were with your words, you were so rambunctious, like so certain and so confident, but
Yeah.
then like you weren't willing to like engage when your numbers were being pushed around. You weren't standing up for yourself.
Mm.
And that's another piece of lack of confidence. Like there are times when as a employee or as someone who's working on a team, like if the leader is inappropriately understanding the situation, you have to sometimes lead up the chain. So leading down the chain is about leading people who you have positional authority with. Leading up the chain is about using key pieces of information or data to actually lead the leaders.
Mm.
So communication boils down into this. And I'm constantly asking people, how do you feel?
Yeah.
How do you feel? And I probably asked you that question a few times, but how many times do I ask you that question now?
At least twice during a conversation.
I mean, it's pretty constant just because it's a feedback loop for me.
Yeah.
How do you feel? Well, I feel like I'm getting beat up right now.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not necessarily what I'm trying to communicate, but maybe you should have showed up prepared.
Yeah.
So that how do you feel is like it's a feedback loop, and it does two things. Number one, it gives me an indication into like what's happening in your psychology, so that I can tune what I'm saying to you. But that's not the most important. The most important piece of that feedback loop. Let's just try it right now.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you feel right now?
Pretty good.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Still.
I'm glad that you feel good.
Uh-huh.
All right. What just happened? One, you gave me a piece of information, but the second more important thing for me as a leader is now you know for a fact that I have heard you and I listened to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the game of like, how do you feel? Listen to it, address it. So like, let's say that you feel bad. How do you feel?
Terrible.
Oh, what's going on?
Just not happy.
Is it because of me?
Maybe. I had some things that happened this morning. I didn't know why you wanted to have the conversation.
Okay. Can we talk about it this afternoon?
Sure.
Because I want to fix it.
Be great.
Okay. Now, as a leader, I know that you are aware that I'm listening to you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you put somebody into a position where they're kind of working for a boss or a manager who's not listening to them, it strips autonomy from that person. Mm. And so part of a leader's job is making sure your team knows that you're listening to them. Like there's a connection point. If they have something they need to say, they can say it without getting fired. And there's a partnership of sorts happening. I wasn't as good at this back then, but I'm really good at it now. Mm-hmm. What happened with you though is you just came in and you proved with your numbers that you had the goods, but I still didn't like you. Mm-hmm. And so we never fixed, it wasn't until maybe a couple of years later where we fixed the real issue, which is like, as a leader, I'll just be out. This is in the past, so I can just tell you this without you getting into your feelings, hopefully. 100%. I just felt like you were kind of a liar. Like what you said and what you really believed were not the same things. Mm. And I think you picked up on that a little bit because then you like sort of overcorrected. And then you just started telling everyone what you thought all the time. And then I was like, bro, now you're just a child. Like, this is not the time.
Right.
don't be confronting someone else on the team because they're having sex with someone and they're not married. Like, you work at a business, bro. You remember these?
Oh yeah,
It
totally.
was like, so you kind of were like, okay, well, what I said didn't match what I believed.
Yeah.
Now everything I believe, I'm just gonna say it.
Right.
And that was just as bad because then people were like, why do you care? Stop talking to me about the Bible. Like, leave me alone.
Right.
And recently, I think like the last 2 years, it's been like, okay, like you'll kind of sense the room a little bit better.
Yeah.
Which just required us to sharpen each other. And like, you've told me some things. I'm trying to think of this example, dude, when you were like,
Oh no.
you needed to talk about something that was bothering you about what I had said. This was maybe a year ago. The FTC thing was still going on.
Oh boy.
And
Are you talking about the Welch with the dinner in
Yes.
December of 22?
yeah, okay.
Oh, this is great.
Yeah, a year and a half
Oh
ago.
boy. Yeah.
So we had asked you to do something and you didn't feel like it was respectful.
Yeah.
It wasn't abusive. It was like,
No.
take pictures at this dinner. It was like,
Yeah.
not a big deal.
Yeah.
But for you, you're like, what? Like, I'm not just a camera person. I'm more than that, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And you were like, hey, can we talk about this? And I could tell, I was like, this is going to be a doozy of a conversation. I was like, no, I don't have time. And then you were like, you got angry or hurt and left. And that was like, so now we have to learn when there's a relationship with like, I'm a leader and I have a relationship with people. And then I was like, I need to teach Jake how to sort of read what's going on. Because if I'm in the middle of 17 things, it's not the right time for us to sit and have a conversation about something that hurt your feelings.
Well, it wasn't your fault either. And the important part to point out that I got to learn is that I hadn't been addressing things in the moment. And the same thing that you had pointed out with me being a liar was basically I didn't want to be honest with myself about how I was feeling about certain things. So I wouldn't address them. And then that would pile up for months on end.
Yeah.
And then by the time I got to dinner, I was so pissed off with you. And by the time that I had asked for the conversation, it wasn't your obligation to drop everything. It was just that I had reached a boiling point and I was going to explode.
Yeah.
And then one more thing wasn't actually the problem. It was just, and I remember you called me afterwards. I remember looking at when you first called until we actually started talking. It took 7.5 minutes for me to stop crying because I was in so much pain. And you hadn't even really done anything because I had never addressed it with you. I never even gave you the chance to make it right or fix it or even just take care of it at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I think that was probably one of the better, you handled that conversation very well.
There have been a few times since then as well where you'll have an opinion on something and you'll share it. And I'll just disagree with the opinion. And then I think those, for the first few times, that was hurtful as well. Because you were like, man, I've spent 3 years trying to work up the courage to tell you something. And then I tell you and you're kind of like, okay, cool, thanks for telling me. But then you don't change anything. So that's,
right.
There are these two extremes that I think people fit into. One is like, they just don't say anything. It's like, my job is my job and I get paid for this. So I'm not going to say anything to the leader because like, I'm just an employee or whatever. And you're not even an employee, but you get the point. Like you were in this territory for a while.
Yeah.
But then the other extreme is like, okay, every time I have an issue, I'm going to say something. And if I'm not listened to and they don't agree with it, then they don't care.
Right.
That's the other extreme. Healthy relationship with teams is somewhere in the middle. And I think as a leader, what you have to get to is you want your teams to be honest with you, but usually they're going to overcorrect when that invitation is given. Gabriel did this. It's like Gabriel went from being an EA, promoted 4 times, moved around other departments. And eventually I was like, I remember telling the other partners like, yo, stop talking to Gabriel. I trained her. You're not going to steal her. Put her back. I was getting mad because I was training people and then my partners would take them and put them in charge of other teams. I was like, stop doing that because I'm the one training them and then I'm losing them because, she was put over sales mentor for challenges.
Yeah.
And then she was like, Ryan tried to put her on an acquisitions business. And I was like, guys, Gabrielle, she's not my property. Okay. That she's her own, but I have trained her for this. Stop trying to pull her away. And that was an intense conversation with Gabes too, because I was like, if you want to go over there, go over there. I'll replace you in 5 months, and you're not coming back once you leave, because I've spent so much time teaching you how to like communicate to other. And now, you know, she's chief of staff and she runs everything now. But I remember in a kind of an altercation where on like a Monday morning, I was like, I need you to do this. And she just went off on me for something. And she disagreed with what I was asking her to do. And I was like, look, this is not the time for you to say this to me. And she was like, well, you shouldn't have asked me to do it. If, you know, it wasn't immoral, it wasn't bad. It was just, we disagreed on something.
Sure.
Immature leaders will then get really weird about that. So they'll just be like, you're insubordinate, you're out of order, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no. You want to train people how to be honest with you, but usually they're going to kind of have to test that boundary. They'll pendulum swing, and you have to then train them back into the middle. What most leaders, I think, unfortunately do is they'll take someone from an intern, they'll put them into a seat of power, they'll train them to be honest, and then they'll fire them for being honest. It's like, well, you're just undoing all of the hard work, you know? And I tend to flatten hierarchies. So when I buy a company or take over something, I tend to take the hierarchy and try to sort of flatten it down, if that makes sense. Like,
How so?
I don't want a salesperson that can only talk to me through a manager, then that manager talks to the director, and then the director gets to me, because that's how you lose information.
Right.
There's actually a management philosophy called, this is like a textbook philosophy. I think this is in the book Scaling Up. Vern Harsh, it's right there in the middle. It's that purple book. Yeah, dude. So this guy, Mastering the Rockefeller Habits 2.0, how a few companies make it and why the rest don't. Vern, he runs a consulting group called the Gazelles. And he talks about this particular principle in regards to management by walking around. It's like a clinical management philosophy. And it's where the leader will just skip level. It's like you have a CEO, you have a sales director, a sales manager, and you have maybe pods or whatever. The CEO will skip level and talk to the front lines, because that's where all the information is coming from. What you don't want is a hierarchy structure where information is being generated on the front lines, it's getting passed to a manager. A manager has a bias against something, so he's cutting 50% of it out, then he's sending it to the director. The director disagrees, so he's cutting another 50% out. So you're getting like 10% of the information from the front. This happened with John at the church in Memphis. I was telling you that Pastor John was a phenomenal leader, but he had a group of people around him that were kind of incentivized to pass certain information along and not pass other information along. And so what you have is you have the CEO who's running not a great organization. And it's not because of the CEO. And I'm using CEO and pastor interchangeably. And so what happened is like the culture got nasty at the front lines. Like it was not very good. The intern culture was weird. The lower level employees were not really taken care of. They weren't listened. They just kept getting blocked at the management level. I don't like that. So I come in and I tend to flatten them. So what that looks like at first is it just looks like chaos, because you've got a copywriter who's never spoken to the CEO before. They're terrified.
Right.
You know, they think they're getting fired.
Right.
They're not.
Yeah.
So it takes a while for them to learn how to be honest in these skip level conversations. I called one of our SDRs last week. Just wanted to see how he was feeling and what he was doing and what he was thinking about. And you know, sure enough, like a couple of sales meetings later, Dean calls me. He's like, "Yo, what's going on with this guy?" I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, he's producing a lot better, but he's showing up to meetings like just basically telling everyone what to do. Like he's got his ego inflated." He's like, this is the pendulum swing of like, oh, dude, someone's got the ear of a CEO. Like, I'm the like this entire organization revolves around me at this point.
Right.
And you have to train them back into like that middle territory. And for people listening to this who run organizations, you might be like, well, this seems exhausting. Well, try going out of business. That's exhausting too. Try running a try running a big company with a bunch of robots and order takers.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. So I don't want to just build a system and then make the slaves like run the system. I'm not Pharaoh.
Mm-hmm.
I want to train people in how to be better humans. And as they advance as human beings, everything they touch gets healthier.
Mm.
And so you're downloading the philosophies into the front lines as well. That's what I mean by flattening the chain of command. We have a vision with one of our companies, a vision statement or our mission, one of our mission statements inside of our values is the mission is way more important than the chain of command.
Right.
Someone gets hired, we start programming them that way. So when they need to say something, when they see something that's not good, at an event, I can't see everything. Like I'm never going to be in all places. But we have people who are like they just started 30 days ago. They see something. They're like, I don't think this fits into the mission. They pass that along because the mission is more important than the chain of command. You don't want a bunch of people who are like, well, that's not my place to say anything. Because then you have organizations that just rot from the inside out.
Yep.
Because somebody sees it, they don't say anything because they weren't empowered to say it. And that's a big job.
Yeah.
I hope this is interesting.
Very interesting.
Okay.
You find it interesting?
Yeah, I do. I've been doing this for 10 years.
Right. When you worked with me specifically, since that's the example we've got,
Back to you, Jake.
Yeah.
Back to you.
what did you how did you help me get what I wanted? Like one of the things that I've learned from you is you ask more questions than you instruct, and you help the person just figure out how to go run their own motor. Like you don't have to demand them to do things. You teach them how to think pretty quick. How would you break down that philosophy and how you taught that to, especially someone like me who seemed pretty disconnected?
Well, I just copied Jesus. That's what Jesus did. Usually Jesus was like asking questions and he was sharing these stories that you had to have a semblance of intelligence, not just intellectual acuity, but emotional intelligence to understand. But then beyond that, it's another feedback loop. The person with more data wins. If I'm a leader and I have more data than another leader, I'm gonna win. I'm gonna beat that person.
Yep.
Because data instructs us how we're supposed to tune to the left or to the right. So a random example, like let's say that you you're on a date and you say something totally stupid, and that person like doesn't want to go on a date with you anymore. You're probably not going to say that thing on the next date. Why?
Because it didn't work last time.
It didn't work. It's like we're already programmed to do this. Like that's how hyperimitation works this way. Hyperimitation is actually a hedge that the human species has developed. Hyperimitation means I'm just going to watch what you do on to keep the same analogy. This is silly, but like Jake goes on a date, he tells me about it. It doesn't work for him. I'm just going to skip the pain and I'm going to model what Jake learned from it. This is hyperimitation. Hyperimitation is really trying to like keep yourself from dying as you learn the lessons. When it comes down to training people, the reason that data is important is because the more data I can collect, the more I can stay away from these extremes that I'll lose the person. So I don't know if that totally makes sense. It makes sense in my head, but we might have to go down to the ground.
Part of it makes sense. So for example, one of the things that you actually worked on this with me when I remember, I was just remembering what happened in that 30 minutes after that meeting. You were like, dude, what's wrong with you? And I was like, he's like, do you think that making money is bad? I'm like, well, this, and we had to talk about my beliefs, and we also had to address like my personal stuff that I was going through at the time. You had to like clear out the garbage to be able to allow for the vision to come in, and you would work on vision and then help build up from there. How would you break down how you work on people like that? I'm sure you do it a little bit differently now.
I'm still going to go back to the question you asked about asking questions. It sounds like you've reformatted the question to force me into the weeds. Is that what you just did?
If you can go more high level on it, take it there.
If I go into the weeds, everyone will be just completely confused.
Okay, then don't.
Yeah, we have to we have to build the context first.
Cool.
The reason that I'm going through this is because if you just start asking a bunch of random questions to people because Taylor did it and Jesus did it, then you're just gonna get you have no idea what to do with the data.
Right.
So the reason that I'm talking about hyperimitation is because that's why I'm asking questions.
Got it.
Because let's say that I have an assumption with you that like I sort of have a gut feeling about you that you believe money is bad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If I operate on that and it's not an issue, then I lose trust with you. Why?
Because you were wrong.
I was wrong.
Yeah.
And you're like, clearly this person doesn't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to whittle that down. I want specificity in what I'm teaching. That's why I'm asking questions. Questions is another feedback loop. So if I were to ask you, let's just go into this right now.
Let's do it.
I have a gut. Let's say I have a gut that you sort of have a weird relationship with money, but that gut could be right or wrong. We don't know. Jake, what do you think about people who make a lot of money?
I think they can be really good or they can be really bad. I think this is I think a lot of people who have money use it for the wrong reasons. And so it makes other people think that money is bad.
Okay. That answer is perfect. So I'm not going to waste my time going off of a gut feel.
Yeah.
Because I just used a feedback loop. Now, did I lose any trust with you in asking you that question?
None, because you didn't pick a side.
No. What if I just moved on it? And I was like, bro, you've got to fix your beliefs about money. Money is a great thing. It's not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say?
In response to what I said?
No, what if I just skipped the question and I just started going after it like a bull in a shiny cabinet?
Be like, dude, I think money's great.
Okay.
What are you noticing?
Then look at your face, like everything about like, you're just like,
what's your deal? I have to be
what's wrong with you? Like,
yeah.
And when that happens, you're like, I don't know if I totally trust this person because they seem to be off on left fields. Like they don't make any sense. So the way that I use questions is a feedback loop. I only want to train you on something that is substantiated that you need to be trained on it. The questions that I ask people, not only does it allow them to think through things that they may have never thought before, but it protects me as a leader and it protects them as a student so that I'm not addressing things that they don't need to be talked about. They don't need to have asked. So my gut with you was, it's interesting that you remember that. Like my gut with you was about money, but I think it was a question oriented conversation.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like, bro, you think poor people are awesome. I didn't just go out and pick sides and start going at it.
Yeah.
I was like, what's the matter with you? Like what's your thoughts about like why do you have an issue with this? Like what's the issue? And it's giving me specificity so that I can go in with like more scalpel rather than blunt instrument and create a bunch of trauma. I do that with everyone though. I still do that with you. But that's not just because it's not just because like I'm trying to get your opinion on things sometimes. Sometimes it's just because I have a feeling and I need to substantiate that feeling before I address it.
What's your heart posture towards it going into the conversation?
Oh, I want to help you. I want to help you get what you want. I want to help you get free from something if there's something there. But if there's nothing there, I'm going to look for the next thing. I don't think you have any issues right now, so it's really hard to use you as an example. If you did, I would have already brought it up.
Yeah.
This happens sometimes when people are like indecisive. We could go here, we could go there, and it's like you have a leader in your organization that just won't make a decision. And so sometimes my questions there will be like, when's the last time you've picked something and it was wrong? Let's just go through this with you real fast. Let's say that you can't decide whether to post this video or not. But I'm getting annoyed by your indecision. So let's just set the frame. Let's just say like I'm a little bit frustrated with Jake because Jake won't make a decision here, and that's what he's being paid to do. Yeah. He's not being paid just to use his hands. He's getting paid to use his brain. Yeah. Which goes back to the types of delegation we have. A lot of leaders just stay stuck in like, I'm going to delegate my work. You have to delegate your thinking. That's real leverage. So I would ask this question: when's the last time you picked something and you thought you were right, but it was wrong?
About a week ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to share?
I had a couple short form videos that we put together. I thought they were going to perform better. 2 days after they went out, I realized that the hooks weren't as good as they could have been. And I realized that I should have just cut the videos 3 seconds. Should have cut them 3 seconds shorter. And then next time I need to make sure that I just don't do that. Like I take at least 2 days, rewatch the videos, and then notice where the hooks are.
Okay, so here's an example just for people watching. This is an example of someone who's been training with me for a long time.
That's true.
Because not only did he give me the mistake, but he also quickly gave me the lesson. And I don't even know if you noticed that you were doing that.
Yeah.
Okay. That's not usually how it happens.
Right.
And it's not how it happened with you at the beginning.
Right.
They would just say, like, I thought some videos were going to work and I posted them and they didn't. And then as a leader, you have to prod for that. So you have to be like, what did you learn from it? You had already gone through this process because you knew you were already doing this. What did you learn from that? Okay, well, I learned I needed to just like shut 3 seconds off of it or whatever it is that you said. Then I would pick up the conversation. Do you know the only way to correct a mistake from a week ago?
It was by taking the time to think about it, process the lessons, and do it again.
Okay, this is good because now we're in uncharted territory.
Fun.
That question that I just asked opened up a feedback loop. The feedback loop, and this has nothing to do with you. This is just two guys in an office hanging out, but I'm going to tell you that's the incorrect answer, which is totally fine. That's good for me as a leader because now I know how to train you. When you make a bad decision, what's the only way that you can correct that decision?
By making another one.
Making another decision.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to stay trapped in indecision. Staying trapped in indecision because of a past mistake will just guarantee you repeat the mistake over and over. So you have to make another decision with equal conviction, and you could be wrong again. And then you learn your lessons, and then what do?
Do it again.
You make another decision.
Yeah.
And so this was a real-time example of how, like, I'm not going to just go in and be like, dude, what's wrong with you? Why can't you make decisions? I'm going to try to find out what's causing. There's a lesson here because people are trying to do the best they can. Very rarely will you get someone who just doesn't care.
Right.
Most of the time, they're trying to do the best they can. The number one investment you can make into your team is how you handle their mistakes. That beats everything else. It's not vacations, trips. It's not even time in coaching them. The greatest investment I can make into Jake is, how do I treat Jake when he makes a bad decision? How do I handle his mistakes? And if I handle them appropriately, those mistakes are investments and they turn into lessons. The CEO of IBM 30 years ago he shared this, I think, in his book. I forget what it's called. But somebody comes into his office who was overseeing like a hardware project, and he had made a mistake and it had cost the company $200,000, $300,000. And he said, I'm ready to turn in my resignation because I should have caught this. And the CEO says, no, I'm not accepting your resignation. I just invested $300,000 to teach you how to do it the right way. Think about the power of that statement. And this person is probably liberated from that. And then moving forward from an exchange like that, do you think that this person was more motivated to come through for the company or less? Way more, because he was handled correctly in a mistake. So leaders, they tend to be like super fast to fire for mistakes or to yell through, like they just get, and then you're using shame and all this weird stuff when people don't need that. People already know that they made a mistake. They already feel bad for making the mistake. And so we have to empower them through that.
How do you prevent the parameters of allowing people to make the same mistake so many times? How do you handle that from a leadership perspective?
This is caffeine, nootropics.
Now you're going to have to explain what happened because no one has any idea what just happened just now.
GABA, alpha GPC. No, it's like a stimulant, but it doesn't have nicotine in it.
So what happened with the Zen?
No, we don't need to go into that.
No? Okay. Cool.
Nothing wrong with Zen, dude. Don't be a hater.
Okay. Cool.
You want to see if you like this? It's got nothing in it.
What's it taste like?
Mint. It's really good.
Oh, I'm down.
It's kind of like drinking a coffee.
Ooh.
It's good, dude.
Smells great.
What was the question?
How do you handle the parameters around making sure the person doesn't make the same mistake? Like, you don't just let a person make mistakes forever.
Well, if a person's making the same mistake over and over again, it means you have a subpar human in the position. So that's just like natural selection. I tend to like mirror nature on that a little bit.
Mm.
If you have a zebra who makes the same mistake over and over, that zebra doesn't exist anymore. Now, you'll probably cut this and make it sound like I'm calling people zebras. It's a risk that I have to take. The king of short form content. But when someone's making a mistake over and over again, it just means that they don't have the capacity to learn. They'll probably figure it out, but they're going to figure it out at another company. Someone else can fund them developing the intellectual capacity to learn from their mistakes. It's the hope that if you get to the level of adulthood, you know how to learn from your mistakes, and learning from your mistakes means you don't repeat them. So I'm very sensitive to people who make a mistake because I would rather someone make a mistake of aggression than a mistake of insecurity and passivity. So our culture is very much so focused on, is it going to make the client's life better? Just do it. Is it going to make the team better? Just do it. If you make a mistake with that motive, that's okay. We'll teach you through it. If you make a mistake because you wanted to protect yourself, I'm going to fire you. I'm going to fire you as quickly as I can. If you make a mistake because you were afraid of what someone was going to say, I'm probably going to address it once. And then, so there's nuances here. It's like, it's impossible to really get it. We have these playbooks inside of Chamber. And one of our new clients came up to me at an event. He's like, bro, no one talks about this. Everyone's talking about marketing and sales, and no one's talking about team development. And there's like 25 hours of playbooks just on team. Why? Because it's complicated and it's nuanced, and you have to be able to treat people with the measure of respect and dignity through their mistakes. But then when someone's making the same mistake over and over, it means they don't care. And so that's okay. Like, you do you. I still have respect for you as a human being, but you can't stay here anymore. So I'm going to promote you out of the organization.
Right.
Does that answer that question?
It does. That makes sense. Cool. Any other advice that you would give on, I'm sure you have a lot more, but what are some of the big takeaways that you've learned, especially with working with salespeople? Because we talked about this a lot before. Salespeople are some of the greatest leaders on the planet, or they have to be. What are some of the things that you instill in those types of people? Because if people become good salespeople, they become great humans.
In most cases, if they get that through the right channels. Yeah.
Right. How do you teach someone to become that right type of person at a very high level?
It's difficult because it's usually a salesperson is motivated on just making as much money as they can. I still get annoyed sometimes because I know that a salesperson is like locked in when they're just getting on everyone's nerves. How true is that?
Way more true than I like to admit.
Yeah. Why? Because a salesperson like fully locked in, like they've usually got some ego, deservedly so, because they're good. The average salesperson at an organization is supporting like 12 or 13 full-time roles.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to sit a salesperson down who's in their prime and convince them that they don't matter. Because they'll just be like, okay, well, look at the scoreboard. I'll go somewhere else where it's recognized. I'm like, no. We don't want to do that. I want to train a salesperson or a team. So there's inside of a sales team, there's 3 levers, only 3. Culture is number 1. Compensation is number 2. And coaching or upward mobility is number 3. I really haven't taught this before outside of extremely expensive events and playbooks. But if we break down culture, what is culture? Because everyone wants to talk about culture. It's the thing that leaders love to talk about the most that they have no idea what it is. Culture is what does the organization believe? And number 2, how fiercely do they believe it? So if our sales cultures are like intense, because what does everyone believe is like we're saving people's lives. How fiercely do they believe it? Oh, they'll freaking fight you. They'll fight you like in the middle of the street. It's intense. They believe it strongly. This is why product integrity is so important. This is why having a client obsession is so important. I've built companies based on the back of just a good sales culture that didn't have everything else, and it became extremely manipulative. Because a good salesperson is going to be like, yo, I just sold this person. And then they told me everything they wanted. I collected their money and put them in there. And then they're messaging me now saying that it's not what I said it was. That salesperson will always leave. And they should leave. If you're selling at a company that you're having those issues all the time, you need to get out of there. You need to get somewhere where like the people actually give a shit about the clients in the organization. So you can't just break this one piece down, fix this, and then fix your whole company. Like you have to have integrity across the whole organization. So culture is not, when you're in a good culture, the best way that I know how to explain it to business owners is you're in a great culture when you belong to the culture, it feels safe and like home. And when you don't belong like culture, it feels like death. Like you want to get out as fast as you can. There's no in between. You don't like sort of half fit into the culture and half not. A great culture is kind of like the immune system. It's just going to expel viruses. It's going to force anything that doesn't fit into that culture out. So we've had sales reps who will get hired and they'll go through one day of onboarding and then they're like, yo, I'm out. I don't fit here. And we're like, yes, that's awesome. Because then we don't have to waste our time on you.
Right.
And it's not because they're a bad human. It's not because that person can't hang. I've had great salespeople with great track records who are just like, I just don't really feel like I fit. That's amazing. And then I've had hundreds and hundreds of people who are like, this is the most amazing culture in the world. What's the difference is just the value alignment between the gig, the culture. Everyone's intensely believing something. If you don't believe that thing, you're not going to feel comfortable in that culture. Does that make sense?
It does.
The second is compensation. This is where we have to fix our mindsets. Like, I want my salespeople to make as much money as possible. Because if they're making money, I'm making money. And if I'm making money and they're making money, then the rest of the team is making money. And if we're all making money, the only way we can do that is if our clients are making money. So like it all fits symbiotically together into an ecosystem.
Yeah.
And then you have some people who are usually or were like professionally trained from some joke college, and they come in and they're like, y'all are paying way too much to salespeople. It's like, it's 15% of your payroll. So when you look at labor efficiency and you look into reverse labor efficiency and revenue per head, what you see is a clustering of expenses around your producers. So your marketing producers, your sales producers, they're just going to make more money. But are they making money or are they earning money? Key distinction. So I have a salesperson right now who is really good. I'm grooming him to take over and so, man, I want you to earn as much money as possible. I'm not going to pay you anything. Nothing. I'm giving you nothing. Everything you make is because you earned it, and we wouldn't have an organization if you didn't do that. And so why would you not want a salesperson to get rich? It's just you're thinking the wrong way. So that's compensation. Compensation's got to be set up the right way. Right now we pay, this averages across different companies. It's 8 to 12% of collected revenue. And then we have bonus kickers at certain levels. Like if you hit, $300K in a month, you get this. If you hit $500K in a month, you hit this. And so people are incentivized naturally up the revenue production. The third piece or the third lever is coaching. Performance improvement plans. How do you coach someone? And this isn't just in sales. Coaching applies to all departments. When somebody doesn't do something the right way or when they are not performing at their best, your job is to coach them into their best. And I'll tell people this routinely, like I will either pull you up or I will push you out. There's no staying in the middle.
How do you determine that?
They determine that. I don't determine that. It's not me. I know what's possible for someone. I know what they can make. I know what everyone has inside of them in terms of potential. You're never going to set a goal that's impossible to hit. You're never going to have a vision that God gives you for your life that is impossible. It may feel impossible in the moment, but there's always a way to it, or else you wouldn't have the vision, right? Because usually this gets into weird stuff, but like usually a person's vision is coming from them in the future. They got it from somewhere, and we feel like sometimes when we're sitting down, we're just making stuff up. that's not possible. You can't just make stuff up. Like if you to take the quantum, collapse everything together, you're getting your ideas from somewhere in the future. We've already got them. So you're very rarely going to set impossible targets. And they get to decide. Like, I'll give you a question that I have asked before to help someone decide this. Let's take Luke, for example. Luke's on the TWC team. I've had conversations with him that started like this. How hard do you want me to coach you? So let's go through that question real fast.
Yep.
Just put yourself into sales frame. Let's say you're number 2 on the leaderboard.
Yep.
And you're making $12,000 a month, and I believe you can make 30, but you have no idea how that's possible.
Yep.
And you think you crushed last week, and I don't think you crushed last week. So we get on a call on Monday morning. All right? Jake, how hard do you want me to coach you?
Hard as you can.
Why?
I want to be at the top.
It's going to be difficult.
And
Just want to make sure you're okay with that, because if you want me to coach you hard, I'm going to coach you hard.
I trust you.
Okay.
Get me there.
All right. Then you have permission to coach that person really hard. Now, it's different, though, if you're like, how hard do you want me to coach you? They're like, what do you mean? Like, would you want me to coach you to your potential, or do you want me to coach you based on last week?
I want to ask something, maybe, and this might be a little bit in the weeds, to be honest, but I've seen a lot of leaders do that. And then what that ends up becoming is there's all these requirements and like ladders they have to climb. And then it's like they disqualify everything that person does because they didn't climb all the ladders that other person said to climb.
Like how?
So for example, let's say, like, how hard do you want me to coach you? He's like, all right, cool. That means you need to be at the gym 3 times a day and do 400 calls. And like they set these like wild barometers that they think like it's just this it's like a overcompensation. And one of the things that I've struggled with, and I've really, like I said, I've told you this before in private, that I do struggle with a lot of leaders because there's so many leaders online where they're making up all this stuff that you have to do. And there's people like you who are like, you don't have to work 80 hours a week. You can, there might be seasons for it, you don't have to.
Yeah.
If there is an answer to this, it's okay. But I've kind of wondered this, and I wondered if you have a take on it, of like that person that, there's a lot of leaders that just kind of overcompensate the barometer. Like, maybe this is just the tension of leadership.
If you have someone on my team right now, like you said earlier, you're like, I trust you. If you didn't trust me, watch this. Because your question is like almost an impossible question to answer.
Yeah.
From a leadership standpoint, we have to go into the employee frame to answer that question. I want people on my team to know that they can be honest if they don't trust me. If they don't feel like I'm giving them something real, they can tell me that.
Yeah.
Do you want to role play how I would handle that if you didn't trust me?
Yep.
Okay. How hard do you want me to coach you?
What do you mean?
Like, do you want me to coach you based on your potential or based on last week?
I'd rather go to my potential.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think last week you performed according to your potential?
Yeah, I did pretty good. Yeah.
Okay.
Why, is there something you see that could be better?
There's a lot that I see that could be better.
Okay.
But if you think that last week is your lid, I don't want to go remove that lid for you. If that's your cap, I'll leave you there.
Okay. I'd like to get more. I love getting more. That's my favorite. So,
okay.
How do we do that?
Well, do you think that last week is indicative of your potential?
I'm going to say no. I'm starting to feel like maybe no, because you're seeing something. I thought it was really good. I was really proud of it.
Okay.
Until we had this call. So.
Well, did you go to the gym last week?
Yep.
How many times?
3.
Okay. Did you wake up on time every day last week?
No.
Why?
I had some nights where I was up later than I expected and just needed a little extra sleep so I wouldn't be exhausted for the rest of the day.
Was that a choice to be up later than you expected, or what?
Yes and no. I just couldn't fall asleep for a couple hours.
Okay.
Like, I went to bed on time, but I couldn't fall asleep.
The reason I'm asking you these questions is because I don't think that based on last week's effort, you can hit what I see for you in terms of potential.
Okay. What do you think needs to change?
Well, I think it's a choice what time you go to bed, what time you wake up. I think it's a choice when you go to the gym. I think it's a choice how you manage your state through the day. You had 3 closes Monday and Tuesday, no closes until Friday, 1 close on Friday. I mean, what were you doing Wednesday and Thursday? Like, if you want to be Kobe Bryant, we have to work like Kobe Bryant to get there. If you don't, I'm not going to push you to do that.
Okay. What do you think that, if, like hypothetically, what would you say I need to change?
Well, do you trust me?
I do. I want to know what you would do. I want to know what you would say to do though before I commit to it.
So you trust me conditionally?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you tell me why?
I've only been working with you for a few months, so I don't know. I don't know if you're going to go tell me I have to go do like the Navy SEALs stuff. Like I went through a other company and they thought that I had to go do the Navy SEALs boot camp to be a good salesperson. Like every good salesperson didn't actually do it. So I'm not trying to do really dumb stuff, but I want to hear your ideas because I'm open to them.
Well, my goal is not to make you a great salesperson. It's to make you a great human.
Mm-hmm.
And your sales and your income is going to come at the tail end of that.
Okay.
So I do think, I think, let's just be honest. So good to be honest for a second.
Sure.
Pause. Part of my ability to get people to trust me is me trusting them with honesty.
Mm.
So we know hyper imitation is a thing. We know that the mirror is a thing. So like the reason that probably most leaders are lacking trust with their teams is because they don't trust their teams.
Mm.
So they're never honest with their team. So their team never feels like they're getting the real thing. So back into this, there have been seasons of my life when I have not taken care of my health, and it's harder for me to hit my targets if I'm not doing that.
Mm.
So you're not taking care of your health.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
So when's that going to change?
No.
Whenever you decide is,
Mm.
and bro, if you've just got other stuff going on and you can't get out of it, and that's okay, take a couple of weeks, but mark my words on this, like you're probably not going to hit your potential until you decide to hit your potential. It's going to be up to you.
Mm.
So no, I don't think you need to do Navy SEALs. I don't think you need to have a 6-pack necessarily. I don't think that you need to wake up at 3 o'clock every morning. But I do think that if I were you and I had targets and I wanted to hit 30 grand a month, I would probably live differently day to day than you're living.
Okay. That makes sense. I understand that's what you would do. So if you were me, I just need to follow those and try that for a couple weeks and come back.
Yeah, let's like not blame going to bed late on something else. Let's
Okay.
try taking responsibility for that.
Okay.
Let's try to actually not just go to the gym, but eat right. So, like, bro, it's not like you're fat. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, I can tell you're not primed. You're not primed for your potential right now.
Cool. And you're not just talking about my income, you're talking about everything else.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay,
100%.
cool. That makes more sense.
It's hard for us to actually get into what you're talking about, Jake, because the way that I'm even handling this conversation, the nuances of it are heading off the outliers.
Right.
So like you're
Right.
not even, a rep is not even going to be like, well, no, I don't really trust you, because notice all of the questions that I'm asking you. Like people should just watch this repeat like again and again.
Yep.
There's so many questions that I'm asking that are, all these questions do is they sort of narrow me in on what I need to say. So you like, I sort of trust you, but it's a little bit conditional.
Yeah.
Got it.
Like I'm
what
nervous.
what do I do with that data? There have been seasons in my life when I have not lived up to my potential and it was very difficult to hit my targets. Now you trust me more because I was honest with you. So even my responses are calibrated based on what you're telling me.
Correct.
You know.
Yeah.
So that like we don't really have this issue very much. And if you're having an issue with your team where you're just like constantly butting heads with them, it ain't your team, bro. It's you. That's why you're butting heads with everybody.
Yeah. If
someone doesn't trust you, that's your fault as a leader. If somebody does something that they think that you asked them to do and that's not what you asked them to do, that's your fault. You know, the barometer on whether someone understands you is at their ears. It's not at your mouth. You can't be like, well, I told you to do this. Obviously not, dude, because they didn't understand it. If they understood it, they probably would have done it. So it all comes back to this leadership. Everything is going to rise and fall on your ability to communicate and to take care of your team. It's another thing that Jesus did really well. He called one of his disciples Satan one time. How mean is that? That's the most intense thing that if I showed up to a sales meeting, I was like, you're the literal devil. Jesus did that.
Yikes.
Why did it not break this person? Because this person had so much proof that Jesus loved him. So it's like, that's the same concept with leadership. Like, hopefully you're convinced by now that like, I really care about you way more than I care about this, like the cameras, like,
Yeah.
this is important to me. I want our content to go out, but it's not as important to me as you are. That's what we're freaking struggling with this in church leadership right now. Do you really care about your volunteers, or do you care about whether they're there to run service on Sunday? Which one do you care about more? There's a mistake being made. If people do not understand that they're cared about, they're not going to care about doing what you want them to do. This is why our sales teams are so effective. It's not because it's easy. Man, you get in our sales teams, it's like we are the elites, man, the Navy SEALs. Most of the big organizations inside of like online marketing are run by my sales guys. How do you think that makes me feel?
Pretty dang good.
I love it. I love it because you can take somebody who was nothing 5 years ago and now they're running a $12 million organization, $25 million organization. I'm like, dude, that is it. That's the game. But if I was transactional with it, I would be angry about that. I do think people are stealing my team and why did they leave? There's no loyalty. And that even of itself, as a leader, if you're even bothered by someone that you trained building somewhere else, you didn't care about that person. You cared about your job that you needed done. And that person was just a cog in the wheel for you. This is like a heart check for people. It's like, I love Gabriel, Dane, and Mike, and you, and all of the people that, Dean, Ben, Lauren. But if one day Lauren felt called to do something different, my job as a leader is, first of all, figure out if I can give her what she wants here, because I'd love to keep her. But if not, it's to help her with what she feels called to do. My job is not just to extract labor from someone. It's to make sure people are operating according to their potential. And sometimes people's potential will outgrow yours. If you're losing a lot of people, ask yourself this question, like, did they just outgrow your vision? Did your vision plateau and get stagnant? And for someone to get to the next level, they had to go somewhere else. That's a gut check for leaders as well. Make sure you have enough vision inside of your thing so that people can hit their targets inside of them. If they can't, what are they going to do? They're going to go hit their targets somewhere else. Sometimes that's okay. Sometimes that's an indictment against us as leaders. Does that make sense?
It does. How now? Let's talk about the realm of the spirit for a second when it comes to leadership, because I think there is that feeling when you can just kind of discern something is off with somebody, or you can kind of predict something. You can just kind of feel it in your gut. How have you navigated that as a leader? You've hired over 700-800 people by now.
700.
There's got to be a level of like gut check. Like there's some intuition to this stuff, because like you can have the right people. I've heard stories of people like, yeah, the person was perfect on the job, just had a really big gut check. They fired him 6 months later, realized what was going on. Perfect employee, could feel it. How have you tuned your gut intuition? How have you worked with that through leadership, through mistakes and achievements?
Well, now I just pray about it and God will tell me.
What do you do when you have the gut feelings? Do you just have all the same conversations?
Yeah, I just pray about it. I think this is a massive leg up, dude. Like, it's a massive advantage to be able to just go pray about something and get into that point where you're like, all right, this is what I'm feeling about this person.
You have any stories you could share of that happening?
The first one this happened was with the COO. This was at the other companies. I wasn't used to praying things through then, though. Like, my wife would sense it and she would pray about it and she would know. And then I would just kind of ignore her. It took me a while to like get to that place where, first of all, like, Lindsay knows any partnerships. She knows hiring decisions, typically big hiring decisions before they happen, so she can weigh in on them. I think it was a disadvantage to not include her before. Now I even pray about things before I hire them. So there have not been examples of this in the last year and a half, because there are people that we have not hired because I prayed about it and just felt like God didn't want me to hire them for whatever reason. And so we'll pass. Some departments have a faster turnover. So like some departments like churn and burn, where you just put a bunch of people in a problem and see who kind of filters to the top. Some are not, where it's like that can destroy an organization. In scale, if you're scaling a business, your teams can sort of separate into a quadrant. On one quadrant, you have like short-term, long-term. Sales is a short-term department. But then on the other axis, you have a effective versus efficient. Can I break this down for a second?
Please.
So if you are in a department that is rewarded or penalized based on being effective, it means there's going to be a lot of agility in the SOPs. It's like it's effective. It's case by case. It doesn't matter how efficient it is. It matters if the job is getting done based on that particular unit. Sales is an effective oriented department. Payment plans are different. The way that we when people come in is different. If you try to take an effective department and like string them along to SOPs, then that department will die because they don't have enough agility or autonomy in the middle. Finance is an efficient department. There's no variation. It doesn't matter like whether it would be easier for you to do something in March than it was in February. It doesn't matter. You follow the SOPs to a T. Operations is efficient. You should never put operations in charge of sales, and you should never put sales inside of operations. But a salesperson can actually do quite well in marketing. Why? Because both departments are effective departments, which means there's agility in the middle.
Right.
Then you have short-term, long-term. Short-term is like this month, this quarter, next quarter. Long-term is like this year, next 3 years. So with finance, you have efficient long-term. With operations, you have efficient short-term. With sales, you have effective short-term, and with marketing, you have effective long-term. So they go into these quadrants. Does that make sense? When you're hiring somebody for a long-term position, whether that's finance or marketing, you have to be very careful that you hire the right people. Because if you do this turn and burn thing on a long-term oriented department, you just break the long-term of the organization. The short-term departments, though, you can sort of get away with just throwing bodies at it and seeing who rises to the top. Should you do that all the time? No. But for sales, we'll hire 10 salespeople and 3 of them will stick around. For operations, sometimes we'll bring in 4 or 5 candidates. We'll test 3 of them, knowing that it's a trial and we're going to pick one. We don't do that with finance. We don't do that with marketing, because that'll actually break structurally the long term of a company. When it's long term, we're very slow to hire. Marketing and finance were slow to hire, because why? I need to pray about it. We need to we need to talk to their references. Occasionally, like if somebody's married, we'll meet their spouses. Because I'm not going to put somebody with like a crazy spouse in like that. It shows problems to me. Like,
Was there a horror story that made you get to that place? Did something really bad in the past happen where you changed that?
No, I just have learned this from big organizations. Like if you're going to take over an extremely important long-term role, and you're married to a psychopath, then you're eventually going to be a psychopath because you're spending as much time with them as you are with us. And that doesn't mean that we're like interviewing the spouse. It just means like I sort of want to know who you are, which has actually been really good because like Ben and Lauren, Dean and Ava, Gabe's and Damon, Dane and Chelsea. It's like a lot of our team is kind of like sort of like we know the family units of the people running the teams, which makes it easier because we know like, all right, well, this person's wife or husband is going through a tough time. Like Damon had surgery a couple of weeks ago, and it's like my chief of staff she'd probably be out a little bit because her husband's in surgery.
Yeah.
And we want to think that these things don't matter, but they matter because we're not hiring robots or Terminators. We're hiring people, and people have stuff. So we get into some of that.
How does that affect the business? How does that work from like, because Gabe's head over operations, like the business still has goals. How do you hold that tension? What does that look like?
She's a multiplier. So any role at the top is a multiplier. Your job is to duplicate yourself. So there's several people right now who could take operations.
Okay, cool.
For all the companies. Lauren's one of those people. Mike has duplicated himself. Mike is constantly multiplying. So I don't feel comfortable having just like one person who can ever do the role. I want multiple people. But the problem is if you get two on that, like if you, again, because of how nuanced this is, you can see my brain finding the caveats for things.
I love it. Yeah, it's great.
So I'm sorry if I'm spending too much time in the weeds, but you do, every once in a while we'll have a client come in who's like, they've got a big team and they're like, I want everyone to be replaceable. And it's like, well, if you make everyone replaceable, then no one's really going to be an A player because A players are not replaceable. So when you look at how I've structured my team now, they're duplicatable but not replaceable. It's like Gabe's can be out for a month and the business is still going to run.
Right.
But I think Dan Sullivan is the one that teaches on this. He runs a business called Strategic Coach. Mm-hmm. Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy write books together. They're awesome. And he's like, look, if you make an A player really an A player and they're running a department, you have to let go of this replaceable idea because they become irreplaceable.
Yeah. Like
you are. So like as a founder, if you have a really top, like a stud player, they're going to become like you. Mm-hmm. So you can't really replace them. They're pretty irreplaceable. Mm-hmm. Does that mean that if they leave or die, then the business goes under? Nope, that's not. But it means that whoever you put in after them is still not going to be them. Mm-hmm. And so the organization will have to shift if players leave.
Right.
Think about like Jared at Grant. Jared is the VP of Cardone stuff, and he's irreplaceable. I mean, he's been there forever. Gabe's is irreplaceable. Dane is irreplaceable. Mm. These people are they would take me a long time to replace them. And even after I did replace them, the organization would still shift in ways to match them.
Which is why you see certain businesses die without certain people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
Very cool.
Elon and Tesla's a public company that's kind of like, you can tell like investors are skittish right now because what happened with Elon is they voted down a bonus package that everyone agreed to. And Elon's like, all right, cool. And he's not like, I don't think he's like, he's not tanking the company at all, but he's just like, well, I'm going to focus on other places. And investors are not stupid. Like they know Tesla doesn't survive the same way without Elon. So you better get him back. Mm-hmm. It's not that he's left. It's just that if you take $70 billion from someone and don't pay them, they're going to be less motivated.
Yeah.
So I think investors are pretty hawkish at the moment around like Elon's now doing Twitter and he's putting a lot of time into SpaceX and he's just like Tesla's still his baby, but he's like, well, they're not going to pay me anyways. So just go do this. And you see what happens to a publicly traded company that the stock goes way down when people don't trust that the founder is plugged in. So Elon is personality brands built on the back of a giant non-personality brand. Mm-hmm. So like Tesla's propped up by Elon. And maybe it's leveling out a little bit right now, but at some point when he's back full bore, it'll go back up because there's a multiple attached to personality.
Yeah. That's good.
Different conversation. Mm-hmm. But what questions do you have specifically about leadership that we can wrap up? Or are you good?
The only thing I would say, it's a pretty general question, is what if you could explain very briefly what makes a leader a good one versus a bad one?
So King David in the Bible, when he's living in a cave with Saul's trying to kill him, and he's like hiding from Saul because he doesn't want to kill Saul. These guys came up around David and they called him the mighty men of David. Mm-hmm. And they were crazy. One of them like killed 700 people with a spear by himself. Another one, there's a story in the Bible about he basically protects like a grain field from a Philistine army by himself. So it's like one man versus an army. Another one, a different one is walks in. I think there's like a big pit that's dug out and there's a lion in it. And he just jumps down into the pit and kills the lion and then jumps back out. Like imagine jumping into a cage with a lion, killing it. These were crazy people, like insane power. What's crazy is when you really read and understand, like because I've studied these stories, those mighty men there were 3 main mighty men, and there were like 7 or 8 around them. If you back up, 10 years, there's a giant who comes named Goliath, and the entire Israel army is hiding behind a line. Nobody wants to go fight Goliath. They're all like whimpering like animals, like they're terrified to die. David shows up. Everyone knows this story. He's like, kills Goliath, and then he leaves. What's fascinating to me is that these mighty men who were like beating armies by themselves were all cowering with the Israeli army when Goliath showed up. They were there. They were not mighty though. Then they get around David and they unlock and they become these mighty warriors. Well, what's the difference? What's the difference between being so scared and so ashamed that you're hiding, and then all of a sudden a decade later you're like the fiercest warrior alive? The difference was David, and David was a multiplier. And David's calling was actually to unlock and multiply other people. This is the best definition of leadership, because it's not really a definition, it's an ethos. When you're a great leader, Dan Martell told me this one time. He's like, man, how did you get these little kids to be great sales leaders? It's like, man, if I could do that, I would have been rich even earlier. And I was like, I don't know. It was a couple years ago. I was like, I don't know. I'm just teaching them. But the real answer to that is like, you have to learn how to become a David, where you're taking people who they already have the skill, they already have the calling, they already have the drive, but it requires a leader like David to remind them of what they're capable of. It's more important for me to get people to believe in themselves than it is to get them to believe in me. Everyone already believes in me. Everyone already believed in David. He killed Goliath. Nobody was like, oh, I think David's a wimp. No, bro, you're an idiot. That means you can't read. You're just dumb. Everyone already believed in David. The problem was that the people of Israel didn't believe in themselves. And so it required a David to remind them and to get them to live in alignment with who they already were. That was the force multiplier that unlocked them. A great leader will take people, remind them who they are, and they'll rise up to match what the leader is saying about them. So, verse in Hebrews, I was just reading this to you earlier, where it's like all of creation right now basically is fitting in the mold of the power in God's words. So it's God's words that speak over people. It's my words for my team. Like when I'm speaking to and about someone in a way that is higher than what they currently believe about themselves, your words have power and they snap up. A bad leader is someone who uses their words to criticize and to describe things they don't like. A great leader is someone who uses their words not to describe what they don't like, but to call up what they expect. It's the higher standard happening. So when I'm on the phone with people that are not performing the way that I know they can, I'm not spending time describing poor performance with them. I'm spending my time describing how gifted they are and how much potential they have, and I'm lifting them up. A good leader is always going to lift, always.
That's good. Cool.
You good, bro?
Sounds great.
All right. Love you guys. See ya.